Hello and welcome to this special debate organized by France 24 and the World Bank in Washington, D.C. Now, we are here to talk about what's next in the battle to cap climate change. It follows what's been billed as an historic agreement in Paris at the end of last year. Countries from around the world came together agreeing to limit the rise in global temperatures to below 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Next week, there will be a signing ceremony of this Paris Agreement. But what happens next as the globe tries to go from words to action? To help us explore these issues, we have a stellar panel here on stage in Washington, D.C. Jim Yong Kim is the president of the World Bank. Ségolène Royal is the French Minister for the Environment and also for Energy and Sustainable Development. Mohamed Bouassine is the Moroccan Finance Minister. Mark Carney is the Governor of the Bank of England. And Catherine McKenna is Canada's Environment Minister. It's wonderful to have you all here on stage in Washington and at the World Bank. President Kim, let me turn to you first of all. As the president of the World Bank, you have a global outlook. Where has the Paris Climate Agreement left us? What are the bold moves that need to happen now from your perspectives in order to actually make it reality?
The agreement was so bold. And I have to say, we have to really really express our gratitude to the French government, Madame Royal, but it was a whole of government effort. President Hollande, Minister Fabius, and our own governor, Minister Sapin. I can tell you the pressure in the entire world to come to an agreement was very important, and we even got more than we had hoped for. But now, I feel that because the agreement was so bold, we have to move even more quickly. Just to give you two examples. I was just visiting two countries, Pakistan and Vietnam. Pakistan is about to put a lot of coal-based power online. Vietnam is about to put 40 gigawatts of coal-based power online. Just to give you a sense, 40 gigawatts of coal-based power, 40 gigawatts is half of all the electricity available in sub-Saharan Africa. So what would it take to get them to move toward more renewables? What I found was that the price of solar, which has gone down so much, is still higher than the price of coal in these two countries. Coal is about 9 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and solar and wind is at 12 cents. And I couldn't believe it because we had just been involved in two auctions, one in Peru in which solar was 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour, and then recently in Mexico, due to the fantastic reforms that the Mexican government, President Peña Nieto and Minister Videgaray have put in place, the price that they got was 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour, with the lowest bid coming in at 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Coal is 9 or 10 cents, so what struck me is that we have to move right now. We need policy changes in these countries, but we need to put the financing deals together. So the thing that I think is critical is, especially in the area of mitigation, we do not have a big window. We do not have a lot of time to move. And so much of the solution is going to be policy change linked to financing, linked to very specific instruments that can bring solar in at 4.5, 5 cents a kilowatt hour, which would make whatever they feel, whatever a country or leader feels about addressing climate change, the financial argument is so powerful that they have to move toward renewables.
Let me ask the other participants what either your institution or what your country is doing to fulfill the Paris Agreement. Minister Royal, as the host of COP21, of the Paris conference, do you think that the French government has a certain responsibility to make sure that actually becomes reality?
Bien sûr, non seulement le gouvernement français a une responsabilité.
Of course, not only do we have a responsibility, but as head of the COP, with the Secretary General of the UN and the President of France, because at a given point, it was feared that things would slow down after COP21 was signed. So we had to mobilize the heads of state and government, and we must say, in accordance with the responses we've seen, that we have beaten a record. On the 22nd of April next, more than 150 countries will sign the Agreement of Paris. What needs to happen to replace fossil energies? Three things. After countries sign, they must ratify. We need 55 states representing 55% of greenhouse gas emissions to sign. So that's the first thing. The will is there, and companies have to hurry up. The investment funds must speed up too to set a carbon price. That's very important. And France wants to be an example because in our energy transition plan, we have a carbon price and the obligation to go green for investment funds and for companies. The third pillar are the territories. We see coalitions of cities coming together because the decisions on energy performance of buildings, reduction of the use of fuels, the replacement of fossil fuels, all of that will be done infranationally. In other words, by cities, by companies, by regions. So we have to coordinate the international level, the national level, and the infranational level, and then the actors, the territories, the companies. We have to have that coherence. We have to simplify procedures. And I would like to say in concluding that what happened that was so unbelievable in the conference and after the Paris conference is that each country, whatever its degree of development, whatever the problems, each country decided to adopt the Millennium Development Goals. So I congratulate the World Bank for its climate program. It is coming together with others to invest in the plans country by country. So all the conditions are there to succeed.
All right, let's turn from the host of COP21 to the host of COP22. Morocco will be hosting the next climate conference, which is coming up in November. How are you hoping to build on the Paris Agreement? What do you think is necessary, Minister Bouassine?
Of course, Morocco in November is going to welcome COP22. It will be a COP which will maintain this planetary mobilization, which is so vital for all mankind. And we are delighted by the very significant results achieved in COP21 in Paris. We are beginning to see such phenomena. We have a terrible drought in Morocco. Other countries are having floods. So we have to learn how to adapt, to fight, to reduce these emissions. And Morocco is committed as it welcomes COP22. We welcome these environmental policies. We decided to produce 42% of our own electricity a few years ago in a renewable form. We have taken this up again, so 52% of our electric consumption will be renewable, solar, or wind-based. A few weeks ago, in the presence of Madame Royale, who was kind enough to come as His Majesty the King launched this effort. There will be other programs, of course, but we have also launched programs to preserve the environment in terms of solid waste and liquid waste disposal. So in the framework of these programs, I think in Marrakesh we will have the opportunity to push further in what we're doing. We're also working very hard throughout the African continent because the developed and underdeveloped countries have to work together because the poorer countries don't necessarily have the means to make the clean choices.
Catherine McKenna, what about Canada? What are your thoughts? How is Canada hoping to proceed from here?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing we need to do is make sure we maintain the momentum from Paris. It was amazing to see, avec le leadership, la France, c'était super. Getting an ambitious agreement was very difficult. A lot of work went into that. And now we're heading into COP22, and we have the leadership of Morocco. And we need to keep this ambition going, and now we got to act. First of all, early entry into force, we're very committed to helping that happen. That's very important. But also now the devil is in the details. So accounting mechanisms, transparency, financing for less developed countries is going to be very important. My favorite, we've got to get the details on market mechanisms. So that's on the COP front. But then you need to look at, obviously, domestic action, and I'll talk a little bit more later about what Canada's doing. But there's other international action that we need to be taking. So Canada and the US just had an agreement where we are reducing methane from oil and gas by 40 to 45%. That's very significant. If we could extend that globally, that would be like closing a third of the coal-fired plants around the world. So that is an important initiative. We have the Montreal Protocol, phasing out of HFCs. That's going to be really important. We're working very closely with the United States to make that happen. ICAO, we need to be looking at aviation sector and the getting an agreement on a global offset system. So I think it's a big puzzle, and we just need to continue to work. But what is amazing is there's really a lot of goodwill. I see this from not just the NGOs, who have always been pushing for this and toiling away, but also from the business sector. And governments are committed. So I think there's an opportunity, but we can't just now rest on our laurels. We have a nice signing on Earth Day, and then we all go home.
Governor Carney, you're looking at this from a slightly different perspective as the head of a central bank. What can central banks do? What are you thinking in your corner of the world, so to speak?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm humbled to be on this panel since we haven't done anything yet to address this issue. But let me speak I'm going to speak less directly about central banking, but more about the financial sector, and speak from my role as chairman of the Financial Stability Board. First, you quite appropriately went directly to the national governments and asked what they will do and how they will turn the promise of Paris into action. And I think we've heard some very reassuring initiatives here. Madame Royal vient de le mentionner, une prise de charbon.
Just mentioned the price of carbon.
Madame la Ministre McKenna. It's very important to move towards market mechanisms, make that credible, translate these NDCs into tangible action. That's the first thing, and I leave it to those who are responsible to do it, to translate that momentum into action. Then in terms of the financial sector, and I'm speaking of the private financial sector, the crucial thing is that the private financial sector has the information it needs to act. It doesn't today, and there's some specific initiatives under the FSB and the G20 that France has also helped to push, that we want to complete this year, that will help change that and ensure that the private financial sector has the information that's necessary, not just to act on policy today, but to anticipate policy tomorrow. Because one of the promises of Paris is not just the 2.7 degrees, but the less than 2, and not just the less than 2, but the 5-year review. So COP22, 23, 24, 25 become crucially important. The private sector, to the extent to which the NDCs are followed through, will start to pull forward those adjustments as credibility is built up. Last point, in terms of the private sector, what the private sector needs to do, and their regulators, is to build up the expertise in managing the financial aspects of carbon risk. It's not something we've had to do outside of insurance, because those risks, from a financial perspective, have largely been over a horizon much beyond that of private actors. COP21 starts to change that. Delivery on COP21 will truly change that.
It's still early on. I mean, we're around about 5 months after COP21 and after the Paris Agreement. I want to ask you, though, do you think that, you talked about the private sector, you talked about the financial sector, do you think that governments are moving towards setting those parameters that are necessary?
Yes, I do. I think COP21 has the attention of the private sector, shifting out of just the insurance sector into the big investors. And let me mention very quickly 2 things. One is an initiative of the G20 executed or shepherded by the FSB, but executed by the private sector, led by Michael Bloomberg, which is an industry-led group of issuers, investors, banks, account preparers, et cetera, to get the right information published in all the accounts of all the major companies. Currently, only a third of the top 1,000 companies provide true carbon disclosure worthy of its name. So this report, the draft report, has come out April the 1st for public consultation. They're shooting to finish their private report, not quite by COP22, but by the end of this year. And then it will be the responsibility to take up that option to have the information that the private sector needs to act. The second, and I won't go into detail at this point, is under the Chinese presidency of the G20, is work to build a true green bond market on private sector terms. Again, that can build on the catalytic power of the MDBs and mainstream private finance.
Let me just wrap up this first section, but by going back to President Kim. What about, from your perspective, do you think that governments are making the necessary steps?
You know, the agreement was very powerful, but if you look at market mechanisms, and I agree completely that market mechanisms are important, only about 12%, I think, of emissions, or very small proportion of the overall emissions, are governed by carbon pricing. Now, you know, what China is doing is really important. By 2017, the carbon trading program will become the largest carbon market in the world. Very encouraging, but still the prices are too low. We have to really move on that particular area. But here's the thing. In many ways, there are more companies that are now working with a price on carbon, assuming that this will go forward. And it sometimes feels to me like the private sector is ahead of governments in terms of thinking that there is going to inevitably be a price on carbon. What I'd really like to see is us making really clear decisions around urgency. Mitigation is an extremely urgent issue right now, especially when you have countries that are putting in infrastructure. You know, if Vietnam or other countries go ahead and put in this 40 gigawatts of coal-based electrical power, that's a 50-year investment, right? Once that gets started, we're going to have that online for 50 years. So you know, the thing that I worry about is we're not yet having the urgent conversations about how to tackle the most urgent issues. And the good news there is we actually know how to do it. We know how to bring these prices down, but we're not quite gelled yet. So this is what I hope this week and this meeting will help us to move toward. We'll make that decision that we've got to move now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to all the participants for now. We are going to take a short break here in Washington, and we'll be back very soon with more on this very important debate, more on what we can do to turn words into actions after the Paris Agreement. Stay with France 24.